All right, Coyotes fans, welcome into the season finale episode of Coyotes Hot Stove. Luke Lapinski here, joined by Matt McConnell, Tyson Nash, Bissonnette, Lyndsey Fry, and Bob Heethuis to just kind of put a wrap on the 2021 season. And Maddie, let's start with you since you popped up first in the Zoom call here. The season wrapped up, and obviously not the ultimate result the Coyotes wanted. But what stood out to you from this season? Because there were a lot of highs and lows. They were in playoff contention with 3 games to go, and ultimately just came up short.
Yeah, I think I think players like Nick Schmaltz and Clayton Keller got a little more consistent in their games. At the end, I think they were just banged up. I thought the turning point of the season was the game in Los Angeles when they blew the 3-1 lead after 2 periods of play, and they ended up 4-12-2 or something like that, or 5-12-2 or something down the stretch. So for me, it's kind of the way it was going into the season. I think it's just everybody, it's getting over that hump of consistency, right? So longer periods of producing and fewer valleys, if you will, for me. That's what I'll remember about this season. But some pretty good individual performances, and certainly Phil Kessel leads that list. He was terrific, I thought, throughout the year.
Tyson, it's sort of tough to argue that point that the season really flipped on April 7th in that third period against LA, don't you think?
Well, again, we touched on it a few times, and for me, I don't think it was that necessarily. I think this is a team going into that game. They won 6 of their last 7 games. They were rolling. They were one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League. Yeah, you lose that game. I think it's the mental wherewithal that they weren't able to, come out of that game, shake that one off, and find a way to put a few wins together after that loss. And it was a tough loss, but it was just, it was just one loss. I think the bigger one for me was that San Jose series. Somehow, some way, they were still in this playoff fight. They go in, they play San Jose, a team that lost 8 straight games before that, and they couldn't find a way to put a couple wins together, or even one win together. It would have kind of propelled them and gave them some more confidence. We know what happened against Vegas. They took 3 or 4 points. But again, I think Matt touched on it. Rick Tocchet's been talking about it all year. It's about consistency. If you want to be a good pro in this league, you have to be consistent. The best players in the world are. Every team, every player goes into slumps. But the good teams and the good players find a way to limit those slumps. And 1, 2, 3 games doesn't turn into 4 or 5. The slump ends there. But again, a lot of bright spots for this group moving forward. The emergence of Michael Bunting, what a story that was. Aiden Hill, what that meant for him and the Coyotes moving forward. I think he's shown that he is an NHL goaltender. Phil Kessel, loved his numbers. Would have liked to see him score a few more goals against other teams than just San Jose. But that's confidence, and hopefully, guys moving forward can have a good summer. They need to train hard. They need to be better next year, and that's everybody.
Consistency obviously was the key. I believe 11 of their last 12 losses they lost in regulation. Even if you just get a couple of those games to overtime, that's a few more points, and maybe this is different. But like Tyson and Matt both just said, a lot of flashes of positivity this season, though, too, and some guys that emerged that you feel pretty confident building around now going forward.
Yeah, I think that recency bias probably plays into the fact that, not only just missing playoffs, but the way it all went down and how tough it was down the stretch. But like going back to the start of the year, I think we thought that this was a cusp team. And based on the lineup they did have, I thought that they managed accordingly. They were close, didn't get there. But to take the positives away, the guys that are going to be here for a while and the guys who are part of this core group moving forward, we did see some growth. I mean, we talk about Chick constantly. Now we know we have a legitimate prospect goaltender in Aiden Hill. Matty, you touched on it right away. I thought that consistently Clayton Keller just did a lot better as far as producing offense, and that's his role with this team. So hopefully these guys can go into the offseason with a chip on their shoulder, the way that it kind of all ended. They can continue to excel and then come back with a very open mind to next year with hopefully even more tools in their bag to bring this team to the next level. So unfortunate result, but expectations coming in were pretty much right around where they finished off. And I thought, if anything, Talk did a good job of extracting the most he could have out of this group of individuals.
Lyndsey, we talked about it a lot on the radio broadcast, but one of the things that really stood out this season was their ability to not really ever be out of a game for the most part. They could be down 2 or 3 goals, and they had that resiliency, and they even showed it towards the end of the season at times, where 2-goal deficit, even a 3-goal deficit, that wasn't too much for this team to overcome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always good when you know that a team has the ability to battle back. They've got the confidence in their ability to do so. They never quit. They never go away. I mean, I think the big theme that we've all been talking about is consistency. I think one of the biggest changes that just has to happen next year, no questions asked, is the start. I think that was one of the biggest struggles for this team. I mean, they did some miraculous things coming back from multi-goal deficits, but those are situations they never should have been in the first place, right? It's obviously going to happen here and there, but there were just so many games this year that got away or had to go into overtime because the Coyotes just weren't able to bring their A game in the first period. Second period's good, third period pretty good, but that first period I think really was a little bit of an Achilles heel for this group this year. So I think they clean that up a little bit next year. And to me, I mean, I don't know what everybody else's opinion is on this call, but like, to me, that's leadership in the room, like getting everybody fired up, ready to go. I mean, it shouldn't take a period for that to happen. So I think, they clean that up a little bit and get more consistent in the first period. I think good things are going to happen.
Peter, what about you? What stands out to you? You know how every season sort of has a feeling when you look back on it. What do you immediately think of when you're going to think of the 2021 Coyotes?
Well, I'll tell you, Luke, I mean, I feel like the last team picking in the draft right now. All the things have pretty much been said that you can cover. I mean, I would certainly agree with a lot of the points that just about everybody else has made. And just to build on what Lyndsey just said, the starts were a problem area. I mean, the Coyotes were victims of the opposition scoring the first goal in 33 of their 56 games. They were outscored by 23 goals in the first period. So the starts needed to be better. Having said that, the resiliency was outstanding, coming back and battling, not only within games, but to try and stop some winless streaks, especially in the first half of the year. And the third period, they had, I think, 5 multi-goal comebacks for wins throughout the season. And a couple of players that, haven't been mentioned yet, I think had a really good year. Alex Goligoski, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent. We don't know what his future is going to be with this team, but I thought he had a quiet, good season. Again, partnering with Jacob Chikrin and really providing a veteran partner for him and maybe a mentorship, so to speak. He really came on offensively as the season went on. Finished, I think, with 17 points in his last 19 games or something like that. And also led the team in block shots, plus minus. So a real unsung hero, typical Alex Goligoski year. You don't really hear much about him, but he's just pretty efficient. So I think he was a plus. Connor Garland could have been the team's MVP in the first half. I don't think there's a lot of argument in that. Tailed off a bit in the second half, but certainly showed flashes of the player that he is, and really just needs to be more consistent, like a lot of the Coyotes young forwards, and maybe play, not as much of an East and West game that he got into in the second half of the season. But, as far as all the other things that everybody else has said, I would agree with. And one thing that maybe needs to be pointed out as well is the fact that, the Coyotes really suffered from not having their top 2 goaltenders available for most of the year. And Adin Hill did a remarkable job keeping the team close and in a playoff hunt. But when you look at the combined games that Darcy Kemper and Antti Raanta missed, 52 games between them. They were only available to play, each of them, for 17 games together, and only 3 games in the last 31. So you're without your top 2 goaltenders for most of the season. And that was a big hurdle, I think, for the Coyotes to climb. And when they were in there, maybe they weren't 100%. I think, you can make an argument that neither player played up to his potential this year in goal when they were healthy. So I think that really hurt the Coyotes, the fact that their goaltenders weren't available. And, without Adin Hill, it really would have been a tough situation. But kudos to Adin for the job that he did this year.
Tyson, we know there's going to be change. There's always change from one year to the next. And we know that there's already a change behind the bench. We don't know who the new head coach is going to be, but you're not going to have Rick Tocchet next year. Not all these players are going to be back. But when we're talking about the positives to build on from one year to the next, how does the core that's going to be here sort of keep that when there are so many changes in a typical NHL offseason?
Well, obviously, we all have a really good relationship with Rick Tocchet. He was so good to all of us in the broadcast department. We're going to miss him for sure. I think changes are always made. Bill Armstrong took over this team. Rick Tocchet was not one of his guys, so I think that's pretty typical in this business. Is that as a GM, you want to bring in your own people, but he's going to be missed. I think the biggest thing for me too about players and what has to happen next year and in the off season, obviously a lot of unrestricted free agents, a lot of holes to fill. They need some offense, but for me, plain and simple, I watch this team night in and night out get banged around, get beat up. Connor Garland, Clayton Keller, Oliver Ekman-Larsson got slapped around. It seemed like every game, and clearly, Christian Fischer's not that guy. Clearly, Lawson Krause is not that guy. John Hayden did his best. Larson stepped in when he could. They're just not built that way. They have to go out and find someone that can make Clayton Keller, Connor Garland, and those star skilled players feel comfortable on the ice. Say what you want about Wilson. I think every scout right now and every general manager in the league is looking for a Wilson. The scouts have been told, go find me a Wilson, go find me a Ryan Reeves. I know the game has changed significantly, but it hasn't changed that much. You have to make your skilled players feel safe on the ice. And when they do, they play their best hockey. So I think that's the biggest change that needs to happen moving forward.
Matt, what about you, just in terms of, there's going to be changes from one year to the next. What do you think the Coyotes need to improve on next year?
Well, I agree with Tyson to an extent. I think the game has changed from the enforcer type, but I look at toughness maybe in a little bit of a different way. I see it more of like what they put together in Minnesota, that Greenway line, Marcus Foligno, guys like that play the game tough. I think there needs to be more of that for sure. I don't think the Coyotes are going to get a top line center because I don't think those guys are ever available. You're going to have to draft a center that you hopefully can fit that role. They're going to have to completely retool their blue line. Do they maybe reach out to Alex Goligoski and see if he'd be willing to come back on a short-term deal because he's been so good, as Heethuis mentioned this year. He was great. And he really helped a guy like Jacob Chychrun along the way too. And they could use him, I think, in this fit moving forward. They're going to have to find two additional defensemen. Is Victor Soderstrom ready? Probably not. Maybe he has to get a little bit bigger and stronger. So there are holes to fill. I think they can certainly do it. And then there's the whole thing with the goaltending situation. You have to protect one of the goalies in the expansion draft. Do they lose a goalie? Could that be a situation that has to be rectified? So with me, I would start on the blue line and go from there. But definitely they need to be tougher no matter which angle you go.
Biz, what is that like as a player? You're going into this offseason, like you said before, they ultimately probably finished where a lot of people expected them to. It was a different path to get there. But as a player, I'm sure you're always expecting to make the playoffs. So you got to weigh that disappointment heading into the offseason with also, like, in 2021, the offseason's already important for next year, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you try, given the fact how the season ended, you try not to put too much stock into this season with the fact that it was shortened down and there was games every other day. I'm just hoping that these guys take this experience, get a few weeks off and then, get serious about training. We mentioned some of the size of our guys, maybe putting on a little bit weight and then also bringing it and remembering this bitter taste in your mouth of not making playoffs and bringing it into next year, which is going to be a full season and hopefully with fans back in the building. So yeah, I guess I just agree with everything that everybody else has said, but yeah, it's been definitely a tough season to end it on.
Lyndsey, those last couple games, it was interesting. Once the Coyotes knew they weren't in it, you sometimes see a team go flat, and they didn't do that against San Jose. And some of that was Victor Soderstrom stepped in. Jan Yannick scored 2 goals in 2 games. I mean, for what those last 2 games were, they were actually 2 of the more entertaining games of the last month or so of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I said it on the broadcast with Heethuis. I definitely wasn't expecting to get chills in either of those games. But I mean, that game where Soderstrom gets his first, Yannick gets his first. I mean, it was fun. It was exciting hockey. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was just, it's obviously you look at this year and you kind of like Biz said, right? You say, okay, this maybe is where they were destined to end up. But you look at a game like that, those games against San Jose, where you get some of these different guys in there. I mean, even Michael Bunting getting a shot this year and everything that he was able to do, you kind of see like some of the younger guys that are coming through. And it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting to think about the future of this organization, whether those guys are actually playing for the club or not down the stretch. I mean, some of the return that you're going to get for some of these guys someday, I mean, it's exciting to think about. So I thought that was fun. I think it was exciting to see those guys play without gripping their sticks too tightly. I mean, it was fun hockey. They were playing loose. They were playing relaxed. I mean, obviously they wished they had something more on the line, but I think, when you see these guys just going out there and playing the game that they love, I think that's what we saw against San Jose. And it was just, it was a lot of fun to watch. So I think, again, just, it was nice that they didn't go flat. It was nice that they still had heart in those games, and still had something to prove to, whether it be themselves, the coaches, the GM, whoever. It made it a lot of fun. So I look at those games as excitement for the future of the franchise.
Yeah, Heethuis, sort of along those lines. I mean, if that was a glimpse of the future, and like those were Yannick's first 2 games, and Soderstrom's played 4. Like, I'm not going to draw too much from just a couple games, but they already showed glimpses of like, this is the reason those are 2 of your top prospects in your system.
No question. They're exciting. And it was, like Lyndsey said, it was really fun to watch those last 2 games, especially those young kids perform the way that they did. And for me, just watching Victor Soderstrom from when he appeared in the National Hockey League against Vegas back in late January to the final 2 games this past weekend, a different player from a confidence standpoint at the NHL level. And, playing with his countryman, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And I think, they lived together for a little while when Victor was here earlier this season. You could tell he was comfortable, and it was fun to watch him play. And Yannick, obviously, just jumped right in and got the empty netter in the first game over the weekend, and then that tremendous shot in the finale. And I really thought it was exciting to see the line of Peterson, Garland, and Bunting. I mean, they were buzzing both games, really exciting. Young guys who have a history in Tucson, and maybe that can equate to the National Hockey League going forward. The 3 of them, who knows? But I think the future is bright for a lot of the young Coyotes. They have a core player of established young NHL players that you're trying to build around, and I think that the offseason is going to be so interesting and so exciting because General Manager Bill Armstrong has pretty much a blank canvas almost to mold the team the way that he wants to in his eyes, because of the fact that there are so many players on expiring contracts, 8 unrestricted free agents to be, 5 more restricted free agents to be. So there's 13 players that spent a significant amount of time with the Coyotes this year that are on expiring contracts. Obviously, some will come back, others will not. That's just the nature of the business. But Bill Armstrong will have a lot of decisions to make, and he'll have a lot of flexibility with a lot of cap space to mold the team in the fashion that he wants to. So it'll be exciting to see what happens going forward this summer, and what type of team the Coyotes have in the fall, building around that young core group with additions in the offseason.
Matt, that's an interesting thought. I mean, a lot of times a new GM steps in, he wants to be able to put his fingerprints on the roster and build it in his vision. As Heethuis just said, Bill Armstrong, now he didn't really get a chance to last offseason because it was so short and such a strange offseason, but now we get to see what he wants to do with this team.
Yeah. I think coming in, he was, he did what general managers do. He probably didn't know the roster, right? So he had to see what he had, right? He had to take a look and evaluate. So I think it was great. He was around the team the entire season. He saw him play over 56 games, and now he really has a command on what the team needs to do and how they should proceed moving forward. So I do think we're going to see a lot of changes. I think it's natural, and I think it's going to happen.
Tyson, as a player, that, right? When there's a GM switch like that, those guys knew that this, in a lot of ways, not for everybody, but just in general, it's like you have a new boss. I mean, it's kind of an audition, or you want to, your new boss is going to be looking to see what you do when he's actually your boss, not from a different city being involved with a different team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at teams that win the Stanley Cup, and there's massive changes always. Let alone a team that fell short of the playoffs. So there's going to be some changes. There's, as Heater mentioned, I mean, those numbers are staggering. The change and the turnover that I think we're going to see. And I guess I'm more on the Rick Tocchet front as far as those last two games for me. And I think we've seen it here in years past when the Coyotes are out of the playoffs, all of a sudden they go on a 10-game tear. I think the real positive is the fact that we saw efforts and we saw some of their younger guys coming down the pipe, that there is a future with some of those players moving forward. But I don't get too excited about those last two games. There's nothing on the line. It actually gets me that much more frustrated, I think, because we've seen this game, we've seen this team play so well. And then when they need it the most, they don't deliver. And I think that's going to have to be addressed, again, in that locker room, with the leadership in that locker room, making sure this team is ready to go. Where were they against San Jose a few games before that when they needed those two wins and those 4 points? Not the last two games of the year. Yeah, it's great. But I think Rick Tocchet said that hockey, it doesn't mean a whole lot. But I love the efforts that you saw out of some of these young kids, because the future definitely is real bright for these young kids. And I think Bill Armstrong is, as Heater said, a blank canvas. He can go out and he can add players that he wants that weren't here for him. He's going to have his fingerprints all over this team moving forward. And I think that's exciting for Coyotes fans and for Bill Armstrong himself.
We got the World Championships coming up here. The Coyotes are going to be represented there at least a little bit. We know about Connor Garland, probably Darcy Kemper, Michael Bunting too, potentially, and maybe some others. I mean, as a player, that's going to be such. It's I guess a conflict of emotions, because you want to be playing in the playoffs first and foremost. But if you're not, a chance to represent your country, and especially a guy like Bunting, where he started this season and where he's going to wrap up. I mean, that's a crazy roller coaster right there.
Yeah, it's huge for our young guys to go and if they're playing with other guys from around the league who are high caliber, like what can they learn from them in the short amount of time they are playing with them, and also what it can do for confidence. I mean, Connor Garland, like I'm impressed by how he's been able to continue his trajectory in producing more points per game through the time he's been with the Coyotes. But I mean, like for instance, like Bunting, like this has been a very short tear he's been on. But, I think Bunting ended up playing 20, 21 games. So for him, if he can go there and then bring it to maybe another level where he gets that confidence, takes that into his offseason training, to all of a sudden where if we're able to have another consistent Garland on our hands, yeah, that's a big boost. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I think Bill Armstrong commented, and I read his comments on Twitter today, that, to go over there and share the ice with those types of players is definitely going to be beneficial to our guys going there, getting that experience and bringing it back. So yeah, I'm pumped. It was cool to see Bunting's name, and given that the fact that they need some players right now, it was nice to see that they lean towards the Coyotes.
Yeah, Lyndsey, I mean, what Biz just said, you have that experience playing on the international stage. I mean, for guys, especially like Bunting and Garland too. I mean, it's these younger guys, Biz just said it right there, the experience they're going to get, potentially that's something you bring back with you next year and for the rest of your career.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, obviously it's a little different on the men's side than, my experience, where that was kind of the pinnacle of what we had. But I think the experience is going to be huge. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys, they want to be playoff contenders. They wish they were playing in the playoffs right now. They don't have that opportunity, unfortunately. So this is a good way to go. Just keep playing, keep getting some games, especially for a guy like Bunting, right? Just keep getting those reps against some of the best players in the world. I think is going to be huge for them. And, obviously I think one of the coolest things, and maybe this makes me too sentimental, but I think one of the coolest things is just like when you do get to like wear that logo for your country on your jersey and you get to hear your anthem, for the American guys, maybe that doesn't do much because they've been hearing it all year. But like with the way the divisions have been, like even the Canadian guys haven't heard their anthem once on the blue line this year in Arizona. So like, for those guys to be able to have the opportunity to do that, represent their country, and get some more reps in at the highest level, I think is going to be really cool.
Peter, we'll wrap it up with you. Just your thoughts on the Coyotes that are going to the Worlds and just sort of the way this season went.
I think it's great. Anytime you can get extra experience, especially on the international stage, it's good. And it really, is great for these guys because it shows they love the game. This has been a difficult season, obviously, in a lot of ways. And with a lot of things still going on around the world with COVID and some of the restrictions and everything, it's an easy out for players this year to say, I don't want to be involved in the World Championships. I've had a tough year. The world is still kind of turned upside down. I'll just relax. But I think it says a lot that players still want to go, want to participate, and hats off to them. And I wish them the best. And let's not forget, we have another Coyote who's heavily involved in the World Championship, Shane Doan, who's the assistant GM for Team Canada. And that's great for Donor to get that more management experience. So we'll be watching him there as well as our players. And it's going to be a really interesting World Championships, to say the least. And as far as the season, it was a great season from the media side. I mean, I think our broadcasts were really good. It was great working with everybody again. I had a tremendous time. And obviously on the radio side, Lindsay, getting you involved was awesome. You're a joy to work with, and you did a great job. Luke, you're a consummate pro, always doing a tremendous work, and it's fun to work with you always. And I know that on the television side, you guys are a great group, so talented. And it's we missed being together on the road this year, but we still had a lot of fun out at Gila, congregating for the games and hot stoving it. And can't forget Doug Cannon either, our fearless leader. What a great job that he did this year, and always fun to be around. So just a tremendous group. I feel really thrilled and thankful to be a part of it. And let's have a good off season and go forward for 21-22.
Tommy sticks from Heater. Holy jeez, like just snapping it around, Heater.
Look, I think Heater just said it right there. We knew it was going to be a strange year. It was a crazy season, a very condensed schedule, a shortened schedule, but it was a lot of fun. And it was, for me, it was a lot of fun because of you guys, the people I work with. So this was great. So for Matt McConnell, for Tyson Nash, for Paul Bissonnette, Lyndsey Fry, Bob Heethuis, I'm Luke Lapinski. Thanks for listening to the Hot Stove Podcast.